Good morning, friends. Welcome. My name is Bill Harmer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Westport Library. We're delighted that you could join us this morning. Thank you so much for being here. What an honor it is for us to partner with our friends at the Wise Men of Weston Westport to bring you the first of two gubernatorial candidate forums. I can't think of a more appropriate setting than the public library for this now. Can you? Okay, that was the right answer. We're off to a good start. We believe strongly in our role as a hub for the community and as a place where everyone can learn, grow, and engage in lively and respectful conversation, which is really what our democracy is all about. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce and welcome to the podium Wise Men President, Mr. Baxter Yorist.
Good morning, Wiseman and other guests. Let's do something really unique. Let's turn off our cell phones to start. You don't have to turn them off, you can just turn the ringer off. Okay, who are the Wisemen? For those of you who don't know, we're an organization of retired men from Weston and Westport. There are over 400 of us, and we have over 25 activities that we do to keep us young at heart and young physically. They range from golf to tennis to hiking, chess, and yes, pickleball, photography, and international discussions. Besides these activities, every Thursday we get together at the Saugatuck Congregational Church, and we have speakers from all over the world come to speak to us, and we do this from September to May. And this is a good example of our speaker committee who came up with, hey, why don't we have the two candidates come speak to us, which is really great. Now we partnered with the library to create a series of forums. We're gonna have Marty Yellen on October 20th, who is a member of the Wise Men, and he worked on the Hubble telescope, and he's gonna be speaking here on October 20th. And he's going to answer a couple of questions such as, how old's the universe, how did it begin, and how's it going to end? This gubernatorial forum that we're having is, as Bill said, is a great opportunity to have it here at the library, and thank you again for having us. Today, we're going to welcome gubernatorial candidate Bob Stefanowski, and in 5 days on Monday, September 19th, you'll have the opportunity to hear from the current governor. The format for today is that the candidate will start speaking for 15, 20 minutes. Then our former Westport selectman, Jim Marpy, and longtime Wiseman will ask prepared questions that we have developed as Wise Men. Due to the short period of time we have today, we're not going to have questions from the audience, but we think we come up with a pretty good list of questions. And now I'd like to, oh, by the way, and we're having if you can hold applause until the end, just because, again, we're very limited on time with the candidate. I'd like to welcome right now our first select woman, Jen Tooker.
Just getting my marching orders there, sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. So many familiar faces here this morning. Thank you for being here. I think it's my official job to welcome you. This is the obvious place and the natural place to have a gubernatorial forum like we are hosting this morning, right? We Westporters, right? Yeah, thank you. We Westporters are, I'm not gonna say we're political, right? I'm not gonna go there, but what I will say is we care deeply about the important issues that affect us as a town, that affect our state and that affect our country. And we Westporters want to know our elected officials and our elected leaders. We want direct access to them. And we want to know what they think about these important issues. And so I can't thank the wise men enough for your leadership in bringing these gubernatorial forums to Westport. You are an engaged crowd, you're a smart crowd, you're a thoughtful crowd, and I know this morning we will be asking lots of great questions of Bob Stefanowski. And so thank you to the wise men, thank you to the library for hosting, and have a wonderful morning. I look forward to the discussion.
Here to welcome gubernatorial candidate Bob Stefanowski is longtime resident of Westport, John McKinney. John was our state senator for 16 years, from 1999 to 2015, representing portions of Westport. John was minority leader from 2007 to 2015. He was a Republican candidate for governor in 2014, and he has been appointed to the Liquor Control Commission. I wonder does that include marijuana? No, okay. John's father, we all know, was a Congressman Stuart McKinney, represented us in Washington from 1971 to 1986. So with that, welcome.
Thank you, Baxter. Good morning, wise men, and good morning, everyone else. I have the pleasure today to introduce Bob Stefanowski. I just want to give you 10 seconds of the truth here. In 16 years in the state Senate, we in the legislature always thought that we were the better branch of government. The truth is, it really is the governor, the leader of our state, who sets the tone and sets the policy. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to hear from both candidates, one of whom will be leading the state of Connecticut for the next 4 years. When I asked Bob Stefanowski if he'd come before the group, he had one simple question: well, what do I need to know? And I said, I've had the opportunity to speak to the wise men on a couple of occasions, and you will get some of the best, most thoughtful questions and conversations you'll have in any forum. It really is a terrific forum. Bob Stefanowski grew up in New Haven, Connecticut. His dad and mom were working. His dad, I think, worked for a long time for SNET, those of us who are old enough to remember SNET, and perhaps most famously was the scoreboard operator for the Yale Bowl. His mom stopped working so she could help raise Bob and his three sisters, and I don't know if Bob will give you this part of his life, but they ended up, when he came to life, turning a closet into his bedroom. Bob ended up going to school locally as well in Fairfield University, and has become a very successful businessman as a self-made man, most notably with a career at General Electric back when GE was GE. Since that time, Bob has decided to give a lot back to the community. He did run for governor in 2018 as a way to give back. And importantly, after that election did not turn out as well as he would have liked, Bob has stayed very engaged. And when the pandemic hit and a lot of our healthcare providers were short on masks and personal protection equipment, Bob, sort of frustrated with the bureaucracy of government, went down to, I think, New Jersey, and came back with a truck full of $500,000 masks, probably a lot more than $500,000, and gave them out to a lot of our first responders, nurses, medical professionals, and people across Connecticut. So it's a real pleasure to introduce you today to Bob Stefanowski.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out today. A couple just things before I start. Number one, John McKinney would have made a hell of a governor, wouldn't he? And I would imagine, I always get a little bit intimidated in front of a crowd like this. There's probably a lot of people here that had bigger careers than I did, but there would probably be very good governors. But you're smart enough not to not throw yourself into this political environment. But as John said, I'm a Connecticut guy, and I think that's important. You know, I think unless you've struggled to make a rent payment, and I really did grow up in a closet. And I remember I was growing as a teenager, and the bedroom worked fine. But then when I crossed 6 feet, all of a sudden I had to curl up my legs in bed. But you know, it was a terrific upbringing. I had 3 older sisters. They were in one big room with a bunk bed and a third bed. My parents had the room, and then I was in the walk-in closet. But I'll tell you, the community was safe. We moved out of New Haven because the schools, my dad went to Hill House, was a really good basketball player actually, and my parents, they valued education. And I won the lottery with my parents. My mom went back to work. This was probably 1970, 1975, and I can remember her and my dad just battling over her going back to work. And in those days, my dad's view was that, you know, the man provides for the family. And my mom said, you know, and my dad's name was Bob too, he said, if we continue to do this, Bob, we're not going to be able to send our kids to college. So she got up at 7:30 every morning. She also worked at SNED. It was fascinating because she was union and my dad wasn't. So we had some interesting, especially when the union went on strike, because there were strikes back then. But they valued education. And I got a good education at North Haven High School when we moved to North Haven. And they got a good education for my sisters. And make a long story short, one of my sisters went to Yale, one went to Albertus Magnus, one went to UConn, and I went to Fairfield, and then I went to Cornell for an MBA. And it changed our life. You know, and I get some grief, geez, you put 10 million into campaign, you're a rich white guy, you have no idea what's going on. I know what's going on. I've lived it. And I'm not embarrassed about my success. One of the reasons I'm running is everybody in Connecticut should have the opportunity that I did and my family did. And that's why we're running. That's why Laura Devlin, who I asked to stand up, Laura. Laura's been a state rep up in Hartford out of Fairfield for 8 years now. We're actually the tallest ticket in the history of Connecticut. So we got that going for us. So what I want to do is John already talked about my background. I want to this is not about social issues today, but I want to quickly correct some things that you may have seen in attack ads. I want to tell you about my plan, and Laura, to make Connecticut more affordable. And then I hear there's some tough questions, which I actually like. I would much rather have somebody ask me a tough question and get the right perspective on it than leave not having asked it. So I'll be happy to, we have a press conference later this morning, but I'll be happy to stay around as long as I can after this. I think on the social issues, politics is tough. I remember the first time when I ran in 2018, there was a guy by the name of David Stemmerman. I don't know if anybody knows David Stemmerman, actually a very good guy. And he ran that first attack ad on me. And I called the attorney, I said, this is slander. How can this happen? And my attorney said, Bob, you got to wake up. He said, when you sign that document saying that you're running for public office, they can ask you anything in the world, they can say anything in the world about you, and you have no ability to stop it. And it's actually kind of sad, the state of politics today. Because I honestly believe, and I am not going to say anything bad about Ned Lamont today, but I honestly believe if I had 10 minutes with everybody in this state, and Ned Lamont had 10 minutes with everybody in this state, I'd win by 10 points. And I'm not an arrogant guy. People that know me, I am not an arrogant guy. But unless you've been through what I've been through, unless you've run a large organization, and probably the best job I had that's going to apply well to Connecticut is CFO of UBS Investment Bank. Because we're spending too much. And when you run it, and nothing against this at all, but you know, when Governor Lamont ran a 500-person cable company with maybe a budget of $5 million, $10 million, he's now inherited an organization with 50,000 people and a $24 billion budget. That's a different skill set. I made it to officer at GE. I was one of the top 100 people in a company with 250,000 employees. I ran tens of billions of dollar budget at UBS. So unless you have that skill set, I think it's very, very hard to come in and understand what to do. A couple social issues. Governor Lamont's holding a press conference right now. If you saw the crazy Lindsey Graham, maybe people agree, I shouldn't say crazy. Lindsey Graham came out and said he's going to mandate that abortion be illegal nationally. First of all, he can't do it. Governor Lamont is sending out a lot of attack ads right now. Bob and Laura are going to take a woman's right away to choose. Despite my personal opinions, right? Roe v. Wade is codified in Connecticut state law. A woman's right to choose is codified into Connecticut state law. Laura and I are not going to change that. Now, that may upset some of you. It may calm some of you, but I want that fact to be out there. So when you're out at restaurants and someone says, I hear Bob's going to take away a woman's right to choose, tell them, no, he's not. That's number one. Second Amendment. Connecticut has the toughest gun laws in the nation. Laura and I are going to uphold them. Again, some of you may like that, some of you may not like that, but that is it, period, end of story. You're going to see attack ads for the next 57 days trying to scare people on both of those issues. And you know why? Because Governor Lamont doesn't want to talk about the economy. Because our economy is horrible. Only state to not have recovered the jobs from the Great Recession. Second highest taxes in the entire country. Highest utility costs in the United States. I could go on for hours with the statistics. The last 4 years have not reduced taxes. Taxes were raised by $2 billion in 2019. We added a tax on food. We added a tax on DVD downloads. We added a tax on personal property equipment. $2 billion increase in taxes. That's a fact. You can't dispute it. Yes, in an election year, we had a $600 million tax cut. Now, by my math, $2 billion minus $600 million is $1.4 billion of higher taxes. The taxes are not lower than they were 4 years ago. They're just not. So what are we going to do about it? Well, number one, we've got to get government spending down. It's not taking stuff away from people that need it. It's not cutting education. In fact, we may need to invest more in education. I'm a product of the public schools. I realize how important it is. But in my opinion, we need to start with a blank piece of paper. We did it at UBS. We did zero-based budgeting. So I'm sure a lot of you know that term. And listen, I get it. I'm sure it's a lot harder in government than it is in the corporate sector. But I remember sitting down with the execs at UBS when I first brought this up. And at UBS, if you were an officer, you got a company car. You got a book every year. Well, two things you got, which is interesting. I'll probably take up this is therapeutic for me. But they had $1 billion art collection. The first thing you got was a book with pictures of all the arts, and you got to pick what you wanted. The CEO, Sergio Armonti, based in Switzerland, had a $3 million painting sit in his office. That was number one. The second one was company cars. Every 2 years, you could pick out whatever car you want. Every 2 years. The driver would pick you up in the morning. He'd drive you to work, and he'd wait there for you during the day. I had the same thing. He'd wait in case you needed to go somewhere. Some of the execs would have the driver go home, pick up your kids, bring them to school, bring them back, come back to the office. And these are men and women making $30, $40, $50 million a year. So I said, we're going to do zero-based budgeting. We got to the car line. I said, why do we need company cars? Well, because we're executives, right? I have to have that driver. I remember looking at the head of debt services. He made debt capital markets. He had made $50 million the year before. So do you mean to tell me that you made $50 million and you can't afford a driver in your own car? If you want to do that, go do it, but don't charge our shareholders for that. You would have thought I had taken away their firstborn. You can't take our cars away. This was in London. I was based in London. I have never been on the tube in my entire life. You can't make me go on that dirty, ugly thing. So part of running a state or an organization is having the leadership to make the tough decisions. and I've done that. I wasn't the most popular guy when I took the company cars away, but you know what? I was the CFO, our share price was down, and the shareholders of the state of UBS shouldn't be paying for that. Just like the shareholders of the state of Connecticut are you. And when I work, because we are going to win, Laura and I are going to win, and I didn't say that as firmly as last time around. I can talk to you after. I know we're going to win. We're not taking it lightly, but we are going to win. When we win, you're my customer. It's not my money up there. It's not my $6 billion surplus that we're sitting on right now. It's your money. I'm the fiduciary for you. And I think right now most people feel like they work for government. The state pier in New London, we had a press conference there 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the initial estimate for the cost to build this pier was $70 million. Three-way partnership between Eversource, Ørsted, and the people of Connecticut. We all got together, we said, we're gonna do a joint venture, and it's gonna cost $70 million. A year later, anybody wanna guess what the estimated cost to build that thing now is? $300 million. It's a three-way partnership, 33%. So 300 million minus 70 is a $230 million cost overrun. Anybody want to guess who's picking that up? You think Ørsted's taking any of it? You think Eversource is taking any of it? You know who's taking it? You, and your family, and your kids, and your spouse. Now, if any of you or me were at the table, which I would sit down with Eversource and Ørsted and said, listen, we have a problem here. And at a minimum, we're gonna split this cost overrun, and if you guys don't wanna do it, I'll find another partner. That's the difference between somebody who is a CFO of UBS and knows how to do it, and somebody who hasn't. And you know why the taxpayer gets screwed? Because we're not at the table. And under our administration, you are going to be at the table. So I can't wait. I can't wait for that first debate, because we're going to show the facts. We're going to point out that taxes are up. We're going to use the Ronald Reagan question. Do you think we're better off than we were 5 years ago, 4 years ago? Crime down? Not in my book. Stolen cars down? Juvenile crime down? Nope. You feel safer than you did 4 years ago? Nope. You think it's cheaper than it was 4 years ago? Think inflation is less? Do you think as a parent, you got more control over your kid's education and the curriculum or less? We came out with a parental bill of rights last week. It was controversial, it was firm, it was solid, and it's what I agree with, and it's what the majority of Connecticut agrees with. Exhibit A of how we're going to push back on the status quo in Connecticut. So let's talk about affordability. Zero-based budgeting, we got to get this budget down. We throw numbers around, well, it's only a 5% increase, only a 10% increase. In the last 4 years, the state of Connecticut annual budget has gone from $20 billion to $24 billion. You may say, well, that's only $4 billion. Imagine what we could do with $4 billion. Imagine what we could do with the $240 million cost overrun that we shouldn't be absorbing at the state pier. We could invest that in education. Our state police right now are supposed to have 1,300 officers. They have 850. I don't know about Westport, but you're probably fine because you got a well-run town here. But many of these, and it's not the first selectman's fault, many of the police forces across the state are down 10, 20, 30%. So we absolutely have to hold bad actors responsible. If a police officer does something wrong, we need to hold them responsible. But for the 99% that are doing the right thing, we owe them our respect, we owe them our support, and we should be thanking them every day for putting their lives on the line for our families. This is not crazy stuff. Governor Lamont's painting me as an extremist. Has anything I said so far been extreme to you? So we got to get the budget down. And that doesn't mean ripping out. We're going to do an audit of every agency of the state of Connecticut. Not in a mean-spirited way. But if one division is doing something well, we should be taking those best practices and moving them over to the other divisions. These commissioner roles are really important. Those are CEO roles. I want every one of those commissioners to be looking at you first. not getting a cushy job with a six-figure, and most of them are good, but they should be looking out for you, number one. So we'll get costs down. What are we going to do with those savings? We got a $6 billion budget surplus. Well, when you get $8 billion from the federal government, which happens to be our tax money too, it's our federal tax dollars. I'm not saying it's easy, but if I gave you $8 billion, I bet you could balance your budget. It's like going to the bank, putting a deposit in, and the teller takes credit for getting more money. I would have taken it too. I'm not saying we shouldn't have taken it, but I think it's causing inflation. I guess I got to stop at some point, but this is really therapeutic for me. I'm getting everything out. You know, inflation is caused by government spending. So how do you pass $1 billion trillion bill and call it an Inflation Reduction Act? That's an inflation stimulus act. So we got to get spending down. We got to get rid of the estate tax. It's not fair. Because you're taxed on that money once. Why should you be taxed on it again when you try to give it to your family? One of the worst part of my job is fundraising, right? And I got to do it probably 5 hours a day, even though I put $10 million into the campaign. It's a big number for me. My wife still won't talk to me, right? I'm hoping one day she comes back. But I got to raise another $5 million. I spend my day, 90% of the people never call you back. And the ones that do, it's a 30-minute discussion. But it's part of the job. It's part of what I signed up for. But when I started this and I went to my top 20 donors from 2018, 10 of them had moved out of the state. They still have a house here, and they still like to spend the summers here, but they couldn't afford to be here. And imagine the revenue we lost. Steve Cohen, everybody knows Steve Cohen, the guy who owns the Mets, .72. His firm, .72, pays more taxes in the state of Connecticut than Bridgeport and New Haven combined. And those are the people we're driving out of the state. So we got to do that. We have to simplify the tax code. We have over 340 taxes and fees in the state of Connecticut. One is called the hypnotist registration fee. There's a tax on vending machine products. Most of these taxes cost more to collect than the amount of revenue they're bringing in. The bottom 200 deliver less than 0.25% of the total revenue of Connecticut. So you know what Laura and I are going to do? We're going to stop collecting those 200 day one. And we're going to put a bill in front of the legislature to abolish them. But I'm going to find a Department of Revenue Services head, maybe it's John McKinney, hopefully, no, I'm just teasing, who's going to be willing to stand up and say, I'm not collecting them. And you know why? Because it costs me more to collect it than the revenue that's coming in. And if the people on the other side of the aisle want to sue me for that, go at it. And when we get to the legislature, who Laura Devlin knows very well and can help me manage, if they want to say we should keep 200 taxes that deliver 0.25% of the revenue, have at it. That's what we need, leadership, bold moves. We should be reducing the sales tax. We got inflation going crazy. We could be giving people immediate relief right now. Cut that sales tax from 6.35% to whatever you want, 5.99. You pick a number. The revenue coming into Connecticut with inflation is still going to be up. Gas taxes. We had John Sununu, governor of New Hampshire, come up for a fundraiser. And he's driving up. He said, well, anything good that I can talk about? I said, yeah, we just raised the diesel tax. And he started laughing. This was in June, July timeframe. He started laughing. He thought I was kidding. I said, no, it's serious. We raised the diesel tax. The gas prices are at a historical high. And we decided to raise them. Meanwhile, we got $6 billion of surplus, which is tax money that was taken from us that we don't need right now. We should be putting a ban on that diesel tax at least till the end of the year. Because if the trucking companies are charged that, they can't absorb it, they're going to pass it through. And it's going to be inflationary, and we have the money to do it. We should have put a delay on the gross receipts and the other tax on normal gas. And people say gas prices are down. Yeah, well, they're down relative to $5 a gallon, but they're not down to where they were a year ago, and people are struggling. I promise I'm going to wrap up in a minute, but. So we got to do this. I was in New Haven the other day, and there are legitimately people making a choice right now between buying food and prescription medicine. It's a nice problem to have, but I know 100 people that canceled vacations this summer because they couldn't afford the gas to drive to Maine. We got healthcare costs going up. It started at 20%. There was some negotiation going on, and they said, oh, it's only 13%. 13%, who can afford that? We got to work with the utility companies. I don't know if you saw, CL&P just announced another rate increase. Do you know utility companies get a guaranteed rate of return no matter how they perform? I'd love to have that deal. We should be putting them on a pay-for-performance basis. So I'll wrap up with this, right? There's a lot of things we can do. We got a terrific state. I used to live in Weston, and then I lived here for a couple of years. What a terrific town you have. My girls went to the public schools here. We got so many things going for us. Look at Bridgeport. If you were to tell somebody, I got a spot, I really am gonna stop, I promise, but I got a spot that's halfway between New York and Boston. 20 minutes outside of New York, if the trains worked properly. I got a deep water port. I got great universities around it. Imagine what you could do with that. And I know it's going to be infinitely harder, and I tell people, Laura and I are not going to turn around the state of Connecticut in 4 years, but I can tell you we're going to make it better. I can tell you we're going to make decisions that start to have some common sense aligned with them. I can tell you we're going to put you first, and we work for you. And I can tell you in 4 years, you're going to be feeling better about the safety, better about the economy, better about the infrastructure, and better about the future of your kids and grandkids in Connecticut. So thank you for listening to my diatribe, but I'll go up and take the hard questions now. Thank you. I tried to run out the clock.
That would have been much appreciated. You can sit there where you want.
Don't let Governor Lamont run out the clock.
Thank you very much, Bob, for these opening comments. And I think that gave me personally a much better insight into some of where your thinking is coming from. Full disclosure, when I came into the Selectman's office here in Westport, I did borrow 3 paintings from the Westport Public Arts collection to put in my office. So, but no company car, no town car. That was
If
not
I'm
part
governor,
of it.
I'll get you one. Don't worry about it.
Just to make sure people understand how this works, normally at a Wise Men's meeting, it's open mic when it comes to this part of the situation. Because we're limited somewhat on time because of the fact that we're streaming this, and also in respect to your time, we've collected questions ahead of time, and a small committee from both sides of the aisle and some who probably were neutral in the whole thing have labored arduously to put together questions. I guess since you're not talking to your wife anymore, I can leave out the "when did you stop beating your wife" question that I had in mind.
She's coming around.
But like any good sport, I played golf yesterday, and that terrible. But I still warm up a little bit, so I'll warm up a little bit with maybe a question that's not. But you didn't. But something you didn't allude to yesterday, and my good friend Thane Gruhl from the Westport Journal referred to it as traffic-mageddon yesterday here in Westport. Combination of some problems on I-95, or related to I-95, problems related to a gas leak right not very far from here, power line very close to here that was down. But the real essence of that question is traffic in southwestern Connecticut, whether it's I-95, the Merritt Parkway, or all the other roads that now Waze tells us to get onto because those roads aren't working, is a real impact on the economy of our communities. And I think it's fair to say that Fairfield County is, depending upon what numbers you see, maybe 40% of that revenue to the state, and the towns along the main line of Metro North, probably 60% of that 40%. So we need to address those issues. People, a lot of our employees who for just the reality of the value of land and housing here, come from eastern Fairfield County or beyond. But it's increasingly choosing not to make that commute because it's just become impossible. And it's not just between 7 and 9 and 4 and 6 anymore. It's 6 in the morning. You probably had trouble getting here this morning. So what are your thoughts on how we address those transportation problems, and how do we fund that?
I think a couple things. Number one, I think as many people you can get off the roads on rail or water, I think the better off we are. The Metro North is the classic definition of a monopoly. The price keeps going up, but the service goes down. It takes longer to get from Westport. I remember lining up in Westport. My first day in Westport, I got the coveted parking pass fee. Back in those days, they were impossible to get. I remember going to the station, and everybody was lining up, like in line. And then there were big gaps. Like, what are these people doing? So people that are going to the city knew exactly where the door stopped, so they could get on. I figured that. But we need to speed up the rail service, and we need to hold Metro North more accountable, and we need to make some investment there. I think we need to bring some private sector money in. Look at how many airports across the world have been privatized. Bring a Macquarie in. Now, you need somebody as governor that understands, because some of you people may be in private equity. They'll go for everything they can. You got to be a smart negotiator. But you can cut a good deal. With the roads, I'm not advocating tolls. Maybe some people here are for tolls. I'm personally not, because I don't think the state of Connecticut should have another tax. But maybe you work with a Macquarie. You create a high-speed, optional, high-speed lane that they build for us, and they get a % of the receipts. I think we need to start thinking about this stuff creatively, because I don't think we've got enough money to fix the infrastructure of Connecticut, despite our $6 billion surplus. People, you know, we talk about the surplus. We have $100 billion of debt. It's like having $100 in the bank, but having a $5 million mortgage. That's not a surplus. We have a current account surplus, but we got a real problem with pension debt and other long-term debt. I can throw out a bunch of phrases, you know, 30 minutes in 3 years, or this and that. You know what those are? Hollow political phrases. I want to try to fix it. So we should be looking at bringing in private money, public-private partnerships. We should be looking at rail. Why is Metro North, why is the service getting worse? Where's that extra money going? I think telecommuting should help. I would imagine you've seen a bit of a reduction in traffic, but I'll tell you, it was pretty bad coming down today.
And yes, it is. My gauge is that the parking lots at our train station they were empty, of course, during COVID, and for the last couple of years, they're now beginning to fill up again. They're not full like they were, but so telecommuting is helping. But we expect people.
I don't know why the public sector is so reluctant in Connecticut to bring in the private sector. Again, you can't let them take advantage of you. But there are billions of dollars, as you men and women know, in private equity now. Look at Alligator Alley down in Florida. That's a perfect example. Do you know the rest areas? One of the things that actually work well are the rest stops on the McDonald's, and that used to be a public-private partnership with Macquarie. They invested in it. They get a % of the revenue, which is fine. We get better rest stops, and we give people a service. We should be applying that model more. Because no matter how many promises I make, we got $100 billion of debt. We don't have enough money to fix the infrastructure.
In your comments just previously, you alluded to the pension fund problem and overhang. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
It's a problem. And, you know, I got a bad rap last time that I was going to rip people's pensions away. I made a stupid comment late at night. John McKinney told me to say it. No, I'm just teasing. But we got to protect people's pensions, rightly or wrongly. People that have been in government service, or particularly first responders, police, fire, they were promised. They paid into it. And now they're 55, 60 years old, and they're depending on that. You got to try to honor that. You have to honor that. And this is not a Democrat. It's a variety of governors, including Republicans, that took that pension money and threw it over into the general fund, took it away from where it should have gone, and wasted it. And that's not a partisan thing. It was both parties. So we have to try to sustain that. But you also can't ignore that we got $100 billion liability. David Steberman had some very interesting ideas on that. Maybe you create on an optional basis a 401k plan. What would you rather have, $100 in a defined benefit plan that you know is never going to be there? Or would you rather flip $90 into a 401k plan, participate in the upside in the stock market? We have to start thinking creatively, because we're never going to get out of the problem we're in by doing the same thing. And it's going to cause static. And I'm going to get criticized for it, but we have to start to try new things, because the last 40 years, ever since we put in that state income tax, it hasn't worked.
Okay. I'm going to change this to a very political kind of a question.
Excellent.
And this is verbatim from the questions that were submitted. Do you think the 2020 election, meaning the presidential election, was stolen? And do you have any specific concerns about the election process here in the state of Connecticut?
I'm glad people asked it. You know, I get the Trump question a lot, as you can imagine. I'll start with the positive. I agree with some of his policies. Lower taxes, putting America first, actually getting reimbursed from wealthy countries that we've been doing stuff for free for. Personal side, I don't like. I got 3 daughters. When that tape came out, I was horrified. The election, Joe Biden won. Let's move on. He won. It's time to move on. What happened on the 6th was horrible. I wrote it that day. This is a sad day. It was looking like a third world country. And if President Trump had anything to do with it, he should be held accountable. Go through the process, find out whether he was. That's it. But you know what? For the next 55 days, you're going to see the other side put Trump next to my name every single commercial. So you can believe me on that, or you can not believe me on that, but I've been saying it for 2 years. End of story. And you know why? And I said it before, they don't want to talk about the economy. They don't want to talk about the pier in Bridgeport being in New London being $200 million over budget. They don't want to talk about the fact that despite we did pay down the pension debt, that overall debt for the state of Connecticut is up $4 billion over the last 4 years. Please focus on what's important. And I don't know whether you guys are going to vote for me or not, but focus on the real issues that are up for debate right now. And if you think the governor has a better tax plan, or a better plan for police, or a better plan for infrastructure, vote for him. But please don't make your decision on hearsay about Roe v. Wade, or Donald Trump, or gun control. We're largely consistent on those issues. And by the way, none of them have an impact on Connecticut. None of them. There's a reason I'm not running for Senate. So please, when you're talking to people, I'm not telling you to vote for them, vote for me or Ned or whoever else raises their hand, but just please make sure they know the facts.
Thank you. In your opening remarks, you referenced briefly your parental Bill of Rights.
Yes.
Could you talk a little about what problem is that trying to solve?
Well,
and why should we be concerned about that?
To me, this is common sense stuff. I've been labeled as extreme for saying things like, I don't think girls in high school should have to compete against biological males. I think we should find an option for people. I think we should be supportive of kids going through that. I think we should be tolerant of it. I think all kids should understand that it's a person's right to make that choice. But I don't think when you're playing girls' field ice hockey that a biological male should be checking my daughter into the boards. And I don't think if my daughter has spent the last 12 years trying to qualify for the state trials, getting up at 6 a.m. every morning, swimming, that she should be bumped by a biological male. That's viewed as extreme by the other side. I'm sorry, that's what I feel. I don't feel that sex education should be taught to kindergartners that can barely tie their shoes. I don't.
Great.
Kitchen table issues. If you're a parent and you want to do that with your child, that's your right. If you're a parent and you want to put a mask on your kid, that's your right. But it's also your right to not put that mask on the kid. And that should be decided by the parent. I can't tell you how many kids I've seen over the summer that are still wearing the mask. And you know why? Because they're afraid. We got to get schools back to teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. Getting these kids prepared for life. I had metal shop, wood shop. College is not for everybody. It's great for some kids. My daughter went to UC Berkeley. You can imagine how popular I was out there. I remembered walking through the campus, there was a sign, "Down with the 1%. Lauren said, "What is that?" I said, "That's you." But you know what? I'm proud as hell of this kid because she's a social welfare major. She wants to help the homeless, and she's going to do the right thing. That's her choice. Don't tell me what she needs to know or what she needs to do. Let her decide and the family decide. And I'm very passionate about this. I don't know what's going on with education in America right now. Yeah, we need to understand critical race theory. We need to understand our history. We need to be tolerant of different viewpoints. That video that came out in Cos Cob was disgusting, where the assistant principal said, "I happen to be Roman Catholic. We don't hire Roman Catholics, they're too conservative. We look for 30-year and beneath Democrats because we can help meld their mind." How can that happen in the state of Connecticut? So we're going to let parents raise their kids. I don't think it's radical. Some people do, but I don't think it's radical.
Change the topic a little bit, a lot. At a recent economic development conference at Yale, one of the
I know
key,
Jeff.
Yeah. One of the key concerns, and I understand this concern, is the challenge of attracting the right kind of workforce in order to make the economic development happen. That, as I read it or understood the discussion, that translated then into a discussion around affordable housing, and that takes us to that nexus of where is that affordable housing, where is it put, whose responsibility is it? And it then takes us to that other issue around local control of zoning regulation, usually shorthanded by the term 830G, the statute that, at least in this part of Connecticut, causes people to pay attention.
Right.
Give me
So
some
you want to
thoughts
see
on
some
that.
people that have time, you want to see some fireworks. Laura and I are doing a press conference on that topic. Is it Fairfield Town Hall, Laura? In front of the community center in about a half hour. 830G was put in place before the Berlin Wall came down. It's been in effect for 30 years. You think affordable housing's any better? And listen, this is not, I'm a product of affordable housing. We lived in New Haven. We lived in, I may have already said this, 3-family house. I was on the bottom floor. My grandparents were on the middle floor. And on the top floor, there were some crazy Southern New England, Connecticut college students, SCSC, and I can still remember the parties. You know, when my dad came to me and said, "We're moving to North Haven," I wasn't happy. And he said, "You know, Rob, I don't want you to have to go to Hill House." So they found the best school system that they could afford. It happened to be North Haven, and John already told you the house I lived in. He bought the house for $25,000. He's still there. He's 92. Was a clerk in the SNET for 50 years. Transformative for me. So this is not about, I know better than almost anybody what affordable housing can do for people. We need to support it. I'm not against that. But when you got a bill that's been around for 40 years and affordable housing is worse, and you got skyscrapers going up right next to an asset that for most people is the most valuable asset they own, and the local town has no say in it because the developers have the right of first refusal, that's wrong. I think we should abolish, Laura and I are talking about it. Do we abolish 830G or do we try to work with the bill that's there? But we have to give back to the community the power to do it. The other thing I think is wrong is that we're using a stick right now. If you don't have 10% affordable housing, the threat is we're going to take away funding. We should be using a carrot. Is there a property that the state can help fund? Use some of that $6 billion surplus. Let's jointly buy a property. Let's work with the first selectman. Find out an area that works for everybody. Because the stories that I'm hearing right now is the developer will come in and say, "I'm going to build this way. Either approve it or I'm going to do it under 830G and you can't do anything about it." We count senior citizens for half a person, affordable senior housing. What the heck is that? Senior should be one. We have a cutoff. I think it's 1970, Laura. If you had affordable housing before 1970, that's still up. It doesn't count.
1990, actually.
1990. I was only off by 20 years. But why is the old stuff doesn't count? Why is it one size fit all where you got 5-acre lots in Greenwich and, you know, where I grew up, you know, in North Haven, we had a 1/4 acre. So we got to work. There's too much. I don't know, anger and competition. We're all on the same team. When I'm governor, I'm supposed to be supporting the cities, not threatening to cut off their funding. We should be sitting at the table together. And you know what? We should have people from the communities that need the affordable housing. We were in New Canaan the other night, and I was getting all questions about, this is wrong, boom, boom, boom. And I'll give myself a little credit. I said, if we were in Bridgeport right now, we'd be having a very different conversation. So this is not a one-sided thing, us versus them. This is to find a reasonable compromise that gives people the flexibility to live in different areas, but doesn't rip away the value from probably your number one asset. And Laura and I are committed. She is an expert on 830G, and we're going to get it fixed.
Well, that, your commentary just then leads up to what I think will be the last question of the day, just because we're running
I don't want to leave. I got to get in front of the press
Yeah.
after this.
So a lot of questions that we, the committee, received, at their core, the essence of the question really was the growing concern about political divisiveness to the point where consensus seems almost impossible, meaningful political action seems frozen. If you're elected governor, you'll likely face a legislature. When you're elected governor, I'll follow
Yes,
your
thank you for
phraseology. You will likely face a legislature where one or both of the houses is controlled by the Democrat majority. What are you going to do now, and what will you do then to reduce what I truly believe is an unproductive partisan animosity and to ensure the views and ideas of all sides?
Politics is broken. I can remember in 2018, my wife and I, we never thought we'd be in politics. And it's just such a different world. And I remember the first ad that Governor Lamont attacked me, and then my campaign said, well, you got to attack back. And they wanted me to attack Dan Malloy. And we ended up doing it, right? But my wife, we agonized over that for weeks. He tried his best. He seems like a decent guy. Why would we go on TV and attack him? And I'm not proud of this, but I can tell you, we don't think twice about running an attack ad now. And unfortunately, you have to do it. That people will tell you that an attack ad has 3 times the benefit of a positive ad. Now, I don't think in Westport that's the case because people are tired of the divisiveness, and I'm trying to stick to the facts this time. But one of the many reasons, we did a wide search for lieutenant governor. We looked at a lot of different types of profiles. One of the many reasons we picked Laura Devlin is she's been up in Hartford for 8 years. She's worked on both sides of the aisle. She's got a bipartisan voting record. She's nice, but she's tough. She'll tell me where to stick it sometimes, when I do something wrong. And I want that. I don't want an LG that's going to go around cutting ribbons. And she's from Fairfield County, so she knows this area. I'm hoping that Laura, and we're not going to get everything through. The other thing we're looking at is is it still working? What can we do day one but that the governor has the authority to do? And then we're going to work with the legislature, and we're not going to demonize the other side. Personally, I thought this speech by President Biden 2 weeks ago, he demonized half of his constituents. When I win and Laura win, we're working for the people that voted for us and the people that didn't vote for us. I'm governor of the Connecticut. The campaign's over. We got to listen to people. We got to compromise. We have to get done what we can get done. So again, this was therapeutic for me. Can I come back every week?
You'd be welcome. Bob,
I
thank you
really
very
enjoyed
much.
it. Thank you for the question.
Baxter, back to you.
Thanks so much for coming and spending time with us. When do you have to leave? You have to leave right now?
I don't know. Do we, Laura? No, I got a few minutes, I guess.
Okay, well, what I was going to say is you wanted to get out and
I'd
meet
love to
the
mingle,
folks,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
stick around. Those of you who would like to meet him one-on-one, please do, and otherwise have a great day, everybody. Thanks again,
Thank
Bob.
you very much. Thank you.